Good afternoon. It's December 12, 2012, 12/12/12. I'm Bill Case. This is the latest in our series of oral histories, and we are privileged to have with us today a fellow who has done so much with German Village, Bill Curlis. Bill, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm pleased to be here.
Nice to have you here. And you've had a wealth of experiences with German Village, but let's start right from the beginning. You're a native of Columbus.
I am a native of Columbus and started out in the South End when it could legitimately be called the South End as opposed to the South Side. I grew up down here when German Village was a place my parents did not want me to be associated because
And why was that?
it was negative connotations. It was considered to be a slummier part of Columbus. I had friends here, and we lived far enough south that riding a bicycle up here was considered a little too far. So never did really get up here too much, except if I was driven up here.
You said you grew up on the Southwood?
Southwood Avenue,
Okay.
which is further south than Phoebus, if folks know that street.
So, just so we have a time frame of when your youth was, what year were you born?
I was born in '47. My parents moved to the South End in the early '50s, and I went to Lincoln Park Elementary, Barrett Junior High School, and graduated South High School.
Tell us what your folks did.
My father worked for what was then called the Columbus Transit Company. It became CODA, and my mother worked for the Liquibox Corporation.
CODA, I think you told us it wasn't always just buses. They also had some other types of transport.
I can remember in the early days, because going downtown was a big deal, and going downtown by yourself was a really big deal. And I got to go downtown occasionally, and I would ride the CTC when it had the electric overhead wiring. And the story I was relating was it was always a big deal at Parsons and Livingston if the bus driver could go around the corner without those wires coming undone and him having to get out and reconnect up there. And I can remember on more than one occasion a bus driver being applauded when he went around the corner just without losing his electrical connection.
You also told us you can remember pre-Route 70 being built.
Oh yeah, I remember when that was torn down, and as I said, it was a big deal and it was a good deal. Urban renewal was very big, and it was an exciting thing. Sweep out the old, bring in the new, and getting rid of all that slum that was represented where the freeway is today, the ditch as we call it today, was a good thing.
So in the era we're in today, we deplore ripping up old homes, but back then, that was the order of the day.
That was the order of the day, and the big thing in folks who lived in the South End was to move out, and that's what I did when I had the first opportunity. I left the South End because that showed you were upwardly mobile and going places. 'Cause stay in the South End was not necessarily a good thing.
Another great institution that was down here at that time, which you said you frequented, was the Central Market.
Central Market was still going strong. Saturday mornings, I went with my grandmother to the Central Market on occasion, and it was a big open market. Nothing akin to what the North Market is today. There were open stalls, and all of the fresh fruits, vegetables, meats, everything were for sale right there.
And where is that located?
It's where the bus company is now. That whole block was Central Market.
Was there a great hue and cry against eradicating that building when the time
I don't
came?
remember. Again, I would have been relatively young when that happened, probably not paying a whole lot of attention. I can remember my folks being upset about it because that's where they shopped. But if there was a hue and cry in the city, I wasn't aware of it.
You graduated from South High School.
South High School in 1965.
And where'd you go to college?
I went to the Ohio State University, which wasn't called the Ohio State University at that time.
And what sort of training did you get there?
I was going to be a school teacher and then be a principal, and I got into the profession, loved it, and looked at the paycheck each month and decided that probably wasn't going to be a long-term operation for me.
You said for a while you taught up in Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon, Ohio. My only 3 years of teaching were in Mount Vernon, Ohio.
And And just to get a feel for this, what time frame are we talking about?
70 to 73, and I taught government and English.
And you told us that you commuted from the north side of Columbus at that time?
I moved as soon as I could get away. I moved to the north side of Columbus to get out of the south end, and then I commuted because Mount Vernon was just a little too small and a little too quaint for any kind of activities, plus I was still involved in so many things down here.
And one of those things you became involved at in a fairly early age was the political world.
I was involved in the political world from basically from birth. My aunt on my mother's side was very active in the Franklin County Republican organization, and so from early years I can remember sitting at the dining room table stuffing, stamping, and sealing envelopes, sending out the slate cards and other political communications.
But that led to other things.
I have been involved ever since then. I got my first job was with the prosecuting attorney's office, working part-time as a file clerk, and I worked my way through college by working in the prosecutor's office, and then in '73 became a full-time employee and the executive director of the prosecutor's office, which I retired from 25 years later.
That was George Smith?
George Curtis Smith, the
Who
was
later
prosecuting
became a federal judge?
C. Howard Johnson, who later became a common pleas judge, was my first boss, and then George was appointed as his successor, and one of my first campaigns was the 1970 campaign for prosecuting attorney to elect George Smith.
And my understanding is, although you weren't living in German Village, you were getting to know people there largely through these political connections.
I still had friends down here from many days, from political and as from old school days, and so I was down in the village a lot. It was very close to the courthouse because the old courthouse was there then, and we would have after work drinks, cocktails, dinner, lots of parties and things were in restaurants here in German Village, was within walking distance. So I maintained my friends down here and relationships down here.
And one friend in particular you mentioned who was and is active in Republican political circles is Mr. Tebow.
Mr. Tebow, Don Tebow, and I have been friends for many years. We started out as political enemies and on a riverboat in the Mississippi River, which is an entirely different story. We became good friends and have been so ever since. And Don, of course, was John Kasich's chief of staff in Congress for many years and is now still very politically active. And so I've been involved with him for all those years.
And with Don, you frequented some restaurants and such down in German Village that aren't here anymore.
A lot of different places have come and gone since over those years. A lot of friends have come and gone through the village too.
Tell us about the old Palmer House.
The old Palmer House was where Lindy's is today, and the Palmer House was owned by Palmer McNeil, and his mother was the chef. Palmer was active with a number of us in the Young Republicans back when I was a young Republican, and we had many of our committee meetings at the Palmer House. The second floor there was a meeting room of some sort up there, as I remember, but it was mostly games, electronic games, pinball machines, and that sort of games were really popular then, and so the second floor was full of those, and then the first floor was where the restaurant was. The configuration inside was much different than it is today. It was not nearly as open. It was much darker in there, and what I remember most was Mrs. McNeil's potato soup. She made great potato soup.
And as you continue to frequent the restaurants and other areas of German Village and hang out with your friends, I understand you made another friend, Mr. Fred Holdridge.
Oh, Mr. Holdridge. I met Fred, and I honestly don't remember the first time I met him. It was probably politics because Fred and Howard would hold fundraisers in their apartment upstairs, and so it's probably on one of those occasions that I met him. But Fred is the one who recruited me and got me involved with the Oktoberfest, and that was the thing that kept bringing me back down to German Village.
Just to back up half a step here, you still weren't living in German Village. I
No.
understood you lived out in Berwick.
I lived out in Berwick. I was out there for 17 years. I moved out there so that I could take a district seat on the Franklin County Republican Central Committee, and I was there for 17 years and then moved back to German Village, or moved to German Village in 1990.
And my understanding is Fred got you involved in the Oktoberfest.
Fred got me involved in the Oktoberfest and kind of took me under his wing and brought me along to a number of positions. I started out in communications and then got involved with the volunteers, and then ultimately I succeeded him as chairman of the Oktoberfest.
Let's kind of take this chronologically. When was about the first Oktoberfest you'd have been
I
involved?
won't give you exact dates because my memory's not that good, but it was in the late 80s when Fred talked George Schmidt into letting the society have Oktoberfest as its fundraiser. And I say have it because the Schmitz family had moved it to the state fairgrounds, and Fred wanted it to as a big fundraiser in addition to the House and Garden Tour to help fund the German Village Society. So he talked him into giving that over to the society, and Schmitz then remained as an anchor to the event every year.
Where was the Oktoberfest when you first started?
The very
getting
first
involved?
Oktoberfest was in what is now the Brewery District, before the Brewery District was even conceived. And there were a bunch of empty warehouses down there where the old breweries were. And the first Oktoberfest was held on Front Street. They closed off Front Street right there at Livingston, and Front was where the ticket booth was. And I didn't say this before, but one of my favorite memories of that very first event, because it was such an overwhelming success that no one believed was possible, was late in the evening. I watched Fred Holdridge go into one of the ticket booths, put all of the money into the front of his shirt, and he carried his shirt brought it up to his chest like this to take the money over to where they were counting the cash, because it was just, they were taking money in so fast, the dollars were just floating to the floor of the booth. They couldn't keep track of it. It was...
What was your role as in communications?
Communications, we had walkie-talkies too, because we were in so many different buildings and locations, and every stage and activity that was going on needed to know when entertainers came in and so forth. So we had this communication system, and we would sign out the walkie-talkies to various people and then keep track of the messages going around.
To those of us who never met him, tell us a little bit about Fred Holdridge and Howard Burns and their personalities. I understand they were real characters.
They were real characters, and they were certainly men about town. I don't think there was anybody in Columbus that didn't know them. They were into restaurants. They were into activities and society. Fred was all about the German Village Society and promoting the society to enhance the life down here. Howard ran the business, and Howard was not involved with the society as much, although he was certainly part of the social side of it. But they were two great characters. And as I said, I was kind of Fred's protege in regard to Oktoberfest, because after he is the one who got me to run for an office on the board, to run for the board. He is the one who talked Terry Dickey into stepping down so that I could take her seat on the board.
But
And
before you could do that, you had to move here.
I had to move here.
And who encouraged you to do
And
that?
Fred encouraged me to move down here, and with all of my other activities and interests, it worked out perfectly.
You said it first, and I don't think this is a procedure we have now. You didn't win your first election,
Did not.
but you were still allowed to kind of
Two
be on the
elections, I think. The practice was, and I can't remember what they called the office, but there was a name for it. If there were 4 seats open up for election and 10 people ran, the 5th person who came in number of votes was asked to sit on the board and to be there to replace any future people who would resign or retire from the board. The first time I did that, nobody left, and so I ran the very next year again, came in fifth again, and so I sat at the, below the salt is what I always called it. I was not allowed to participate in the discussion or anything, I was just supposed to be there. And somewhere during the course of the year, Fred asked Terry Dickey if she would step down so that I could have her seat on the board, and she was ready, willing, and able, and very graciously said yes, a debt which I pay back to her all the time and acknowledge to her for having gotten me involved in it.
And you kept a strong involvement in Oktoberfest.
Strong involvement in Oktoberfest. After doing communications for a number of years, I then moved to, Bob Balthaser decided to back out of his big commitment to the society, to the Oktoberfest, and he was the volunteer coordinator. And I became volunteer coordinator, and then when Fred decided that he was going to step down as chair, I became the chair of the Oktoberfest.
My understanding is we're talking about lots and lots of volunteers at its peak.
The Oktoberfest was a very big project. We literally built a small city with all of the infrastructure, water, electricity, erecting buildings, tents, and so it was a year-round project. We had a very active organizing committee, and everybody had their jobs. We recruited 1,200 volunteers to put the event on, and we did all this in 1 week of actual on-site activity, and then 365 minus 7 days of the year organizing everything else.
But you never had the luxury of being able to put it on in the same place every year.
We would stay for a place for a couple of years and either wear out our welcome, or something would have happened. Like in the brewery district, we were there for 3 or 4 years, and the Edwards family started doing the development down there, and so the space was no longer available. We moved to the Grant and Livingston lot next to the Afrocentric School for a number of years, which was a good location. It was just way too large, and when it rained, it became a big mud hole. So we looked for other venues. We moved down to the brewery district again, where the new Kroger store is. And that site had not been developed, and we were there for 3 or 4 years. Then we bounced around to the Arena District just after it reopened, or became the Arena District, and then moved over to COSI at the end.
And you mentioned a story at one point that you were pretty desperate for a site, and Jim Hopple helped you
Mr.
acquire the
Hopple
Kroger site.
came in at the last minute. We had made arrangements to move Oktoberfest to a different location in the brewery district, and at the last minute, the property owner pulled it and would not let us go there. And we very desperately, Mr. Hopple mentioned casually that he knew the owner of the property where the Kroger store was eventually going to go up. And he made one phone call, and we went down there to see the site and to talk to them about it. They were very leery about letting us, because we're an alcohol-related event, and that always set up signals to folks. And Mr. Hopple made a second phone call and talked them into it, and we had the place in a matter of days. So.
The sale of alcohol was a big moneymaker for you, but it also provided part of the logistical problem
Yes.
year after year. Tell us about that.
Because of where when we were on public property owned by the city of Columbus, it was always an issue, because you have to get council's approval for selling alcohol, and we could never get that. And so we had to work out various logistic arrangements for putting the actual sale of alcohol in the street or in non-city owned property. That was a big issue. It was always a big issue with the school board too, although they would waive it for a number of years. Liability issues and everything else concerned them, so we carried extraordinary sums of insurance and the costs therein related, all because of the alcohol. But Oktoberfest made its money in 2 ways. One was ticket sales, and the other was alcohol sales. And so it is vital to the success of Oktoberfest to be able to sell beer.
My understanding is that Oktoberfest made some years, a great deal of money for the society, but there was always an attendant amount of risk involved in it that made it kind of a dicey proposition at times.
Dicey proposition. We thought we had done the best things possible in looking at when there was the least amount of rain, that an outdoor event like the Oktoberfest is governed by the elements. And if it would rain just one day of the 3 days we would have the Oktoberfest, it hurt us badly. Or even the threat of rain. And then the other thing was when there was an away OSU football game. We tried to organize the Oktoberfest around OSU's home games because that gave us a set-in crowd. As soon as the game was over, we brought people down to the Oktoberfest. So, and with the erratic football scheduling that started to go on in the early 2000s with some away games in September, we had to move things around that way too.
Oktoberfest that you were able to.
In some of the really good years, we'd make as much as 100,000. In some of the bad years, we'd make 40 to 50,000. The problem was every year in budgeting, we would budget as if we were going to make 100,000, and then when we didn't, for the society, it was a scramble then to accommodate the difference. And so we got better at budgeting, but the expectation was always to do more, and so we.
There was a little more staffing at that time, I think you told me, to organize volunteers here at the society.
First 10 years of the Oktoberfest, we hired an outside management company from Cox Concessions to some other folks to put on the event. Then when I became chair of the Oktoberfest, we took the entire management of the Oktoberfest in-house. And that required a year-round staff, which included Aaron Leventhal. We first got Cindy Creedon, was hired by the Oktoberfest, and we brought her in. We had a part-time volunteer coordinator, and we had a secretary clerk that the Oktoberfest paid for. And even with those expenses year-round, we kept making the 100,000. So.
You told me that we've just covered the tip of the iceberg of the things that might arise in the Oktoberfest, things like water problems and noise restrictions and those sorts of things.
And the licensure and everything. As I said, it's building a small city, and so months in advance you had to have your liquor license, you had to have your insurance, you had to get the city to bring water in for the food vendors, you had to have fire protection, you had to have police protection. Some of my favorite folks are the Columbus Police Department. We made relationships with them because we'd hire 30 or 40 over 3 days, 30 or 40 police officers. So there wasn't a police officer in Columbus that I didn't say howdy to.
Wasn't there also some sort of issue about you couldn't stake your tents because of
in one of our locations, the city owned it, and they had just put in a new underground watering system, and as a result, we couldn't stake tents because we didn't know where the stakes were going to go into ground, so we had to reduce the size of all of our tents so that you can use water barrels to hold them down instead of stakes. And that was another new experience that we learned as time went on.
How long did you chair?
I was chair for 10 years. Fred was the chair for 10 years, and I was the chair of 10 years, and then the society got out of the business.
But you've been heavily involved for...
From the very first, because the very first Oktoberfest, I sat in an old barn down in the brewery district with the communications.
Out of those 20 years of involvement, is there a great memory that stands out to you?
A single memory, not so much. I mean, I can tell all kinds of war stories, but they're not as funny if you don't know the people. But knowing the people is what it's all about. It literally was Old Home Week every time. We'd have 1,200 volunteers. We had a couple marriages at the Oktoberfest. We had, I can't tell you the number of people who told me things about children being born as a result of the Oktoberfest. friendships. People came back. A former secretary of the board moved to Arizona, and she scheduled her annual vacation so she could come back to work the Oktoberfest in trash, of all things. We had so many people every year that came back just to see old friends. But so the people were the best part of the Oktoberfest.
One of the great characters we have in German Village right now is a gentleman by the name of Jerry Glick.
Mr. Glick.
And you had occasion to know Mr. Glick well before ever coming to German Village.
Well before.
Tell us about that.
When I was in the 8th grade at Barrett Junior High School, my English teacher's name was Jerry Glick. Mr. Glick was in his second year of teaching at that time, and the students, I was in Miss Brown's homeroom, and Miss Brown's homeroom was right across the hall from Mr. Glick's homeroom, and there wasn't a student in that school that didn't have Miss Brown married to Mr. Glick during that first year. We thought that was a match made in heaven. And then years later, I come back to German Village, and I am, when I first went on the board, Jerry Glick was the president of the society and chaired the board meetings. And I recognized him right away. But Mr. Glick was a man about the community and had a certain image, and I don't think he recognized me, and it wasn't until months later that we had occasion to talk about it, and I introduced myself to him as a former student, and I think the age difference there was such that I don't think he wanted that generally known. Nowadays, it isn't a problem, but Mr. Glick and I, we continue to be associated because Jerry has not missed a game in Ohio Stadium since 1947. And until 2 years ago, he hosted a tailgate party on campus before every football game that we always used to go to. And now he's not able to do that anymore, and so we make sure Mr. Glick continues his long series of unmissed games at Ohio Stadium. So
That must continue.
it must.
So here you are, joining the society board. You told us about that, 1992, thereabouts.
Through the back door, yep.
And your primary task, it sounds like early on, was being involved with Oktoberfest. Were there other things that you did in your early years on the...
My first assignments with I went on the board and was involved in a couple other committees, but as I've said, there were so many different committees and so many different activities. And then I became vice president, I think, in the second year to Sharon Steele's presidency. And as vice president, I chaired the administrative committee, which was like the executive committee is today. And then when Sharon did not run, after 2 years, I became president.
And that was 2000, thereabouts?
97, 98. It was I had just retired from the prosecuting attorney's office, which is what gave me the time to be able to take the job on.
And we talked about how things were different on the society board as compared to today. Tell us about that.
So many things were different. The most noticeable one that I talk about a lot, even today at board meetings, was the fact that every activity had a fundraising element to it and its own checking account. I think at one time we counted 20-some different accounts that were out there, run and operated by the person who was the signator on the checking account. Money from House and Garden went into a general fund that ran things, but if somebody had extra money in a committee or wasn't using all their money, that was never thrown into the pot. And so one of the first things we did was to clean up that whole operation so that we had one mission and one purpose and not single-minded activities with their own resources.
And the board was bigger.
The board was much bigger, and people were associated with different activities. There were appointed members to the board who were, one of the early constitutions saw the German Village Society as an education, supporting education. And so we had a member who supposedly was to have been appointed by the president of the Ohio State University. We had another member in civic relations who was supposed to be appointed by the Chamber of Commerce president, all with specific tasks in mind and to some degree specific people in mind, so that there was a wide range of responsibilities, a board attorney, and other kinds of things like that.
I believe you also told us at times there was a little bit of micromanaging of expense accounts at the meetings that you didn't think was really the right way to go.
I remember one of my first board meetings, Mike Widener was the executive director at that time, and she came in to tell us that she wanted to be reimbursed for some expenses that she'd paid for out of her checking account or credit card. I don't think there were that much credit card back then, but she was running the society on a day-to-day basis out of her own pocket, and there was a 15-minute discussion on whether or not to reimburse her for expenses that were legitimately for the society. It was that much micromanagement. There was also everything from the date that invitations were to be put in the mail, to the color of the paper, to all of this minutia that the board dealt with at every meeting. Meetings would go on to late into the night because there was so much detail and micromanagement.
Was the mission of the society any different than it is now?
Much different. The whole social aspects of the society and concentration on fundraising was much bigger. I've also told the story about when I first became president, I went back and read through the constitutions of previous eras. And the very first constitution of the German Village Society contemplated the society being a real estate holding company. There was a whole couple pages in that constitution talking about how they were going to buy property, resell it, what the money could be used for, and how it was going to be used to further the development of German village preservation. So every year, and probably in 10-year cycles, it seems as if the mission of the society has differed to some degree to the place where we are today, where I still say we are a civic association that is involved in the community to help ensure the longevity of our preservation efforts down here, as well as the uniqueness of our community.
So you retire from your position with the county, and shortly after that you become president of the German Village Society.
President, there was a month-long gap there. I retired in February, 2 months, and I became president in January. And I think my boss was glad to see me leave because I think there were more phone calls from German Village than there were business discussions in those first 2 months. But
So did you have any agenda of things you wanted to accomplish while you were president?
the big thing that we were trying to do, and that I continue to work on, is the organization of the society. The society is a business. It is a full-time business. It is a $1 million business. And I think it needs to be run with those kind of practices in mind. The Board of Trustees is a big-picture organization. The work of the society needs to be conducted in the committees and from the professional help that we hire. And changing that whole culture and thought process has been what I hope we've accomplished over the years I've been involved.
And I think you told me that you're proud of the advancements you were able to make on that score during your
I think so.
presidency.
There have been much movement in the right direction. There's still a lot to do. And when you're dealing with a volunteer organization, we all have different points of view as to what we're doing, and so that mission development and annual big picture look is always really important in my mind, because that sets the tone of what we're really all about down here.
Notwithstanding your retirement from your job with the county, you stayed active in politics.
Oh, yes, I'm still involved in the Republican organization. I'm an officer in the party, and I am involved with a number of candidates. I do the business management side of political campaign committees, and as I say, as long as the legislature's in session, they will continue to give me more work to do because they keep changing the election laws, and that gives me things to do.
I believe you said to me that one of the things that you think is most important for the German Village Society to do, and you've been involved with, is to keep an eye on the city and make sure the city gives us a fair share of the benefits that we're entitled to down here, and keep them knowledgeable about what our mission is.
It's a continuing process. I don't think the city knows what to do with groups like the German Village Society, and so we have to keep educating the folks down there. Not only do we want our fair share of city services, we also have to make them understand that one size does not fit all in German Village. We need smaller trash receptacles because we have houses that have no place for those trash receptacles to go. We need special attention to our brick streets. Though the city no longer repairs brick streets, they contract that out, but it is still an important contract, and $30,000 or $40,000 a year does not repair brick streets. We have to continually educate our city council and the administration of the uniqueness of German Village and the contribution German Village makes to the city. There's a story the other day about a new big convention that's coming into town in 2007, and one of the comments was, now we have to figure out what they're going to do when they get here. Well, the number one tourist attraction destination in central Ohio is German Village. So the first thing folks ought to be doing is coming down here and talking to us, and for us to let them know what we have to offer down here.
Is the city always sensitive to our particular infrastructure, brick streets, and that sort of thing?
They are once you explain it to them, but as you know, we've had such a turnover. Every time you get a new council member, every time you get a new mayor, they have to be re-educated, and that's one of the major missions, I think, of the German Village Society, is to keep our public officials aware of the significance of German Village to the city of Columbus. And ultimately, they're going to have to spend some money. Our streets are 150 years old, and they need to be maintained, and that's just one part of the infrastructure. Sewers and drains and all those other unattractive kinds of things are the things we have to continue to remind our city fathers that that's what and mothers that have to be continue to be maintained.
Back to Oktoberfest just for one moment. There's something I wanted to ask you about that. The society stopped running it in, I think, 2009.
Yes.
And what? Tell us how that came to be.
The cost and usefulness of Oktoberfest were a big issue every year. Yes, it was making money, but it took a lot of money, it took a lot of effort and a lot of resources to make it happen. With the economy downsizing and with Columbus losing a lot of its major businesses that provided the kind of sponsorship money that you need to make that event grow and profitable, we're also no longer here. Then we lost our site. And so we decided to reinvent the Oktoberfest and to look at whether or not it could be brought for the first time into German Village itself. We conducted a campaign to try to get the community to accept closing down 3rd Street and moving the Oktoberfest there. There was some resistance. We did eventually get the 80% of the property owners to agree to it, but by that time the support for an Oktoberfest had eroded in the board, and by one vote, as it happened, they decided to suspend, is the word that was used, the Oktoberfest for that year, and to regroup and see if we could do something else. And of course, by that time, once it ended, there was no going back. So.
And the Schmitz took it back.
And the Schmitz family came back in and decided to do what they wanted to do many years ago, which is take it up and make it a commercial venture instead of a 501c3 fundraising adventure.
And at least as we sit here today, that still functions at the
They are still
fairgrounds.
functioning, and yes, and the funny part about that is Cox Concessions, which started the Oktoberfest, or was our administrator for the Oktoberfest, is now at the fairgrounds, and Charlie Cox and his family are who the Schmidt family is dealing with once again to run the Oktoberfest on the fairgrounds.
So the same characters.
The same
reemerge.
cast of characters. It was, again, the very first one, when they first took it back, was an old home week with all those folks up there, too.
You took a short break from leadership role in the society, and then you came back, and you're very active again. Tell me what you're looking to achieve in the future as we look forward from 12-12-12 here.
Well, don't hold me to everything, but again, I still think that the civic relations side of the society is the important part, and we need to keep making city folks aware of our significance, and I think there are a lot of things more to do in that area, and that's what I want to be involved with. This whole Third Street beautification restoration is really big, and it will set the tone for others. Third Street isn't the only street that needs to be restored, and so there's a lot more things to do.
Hopefully, somebody who sees this tape 10, 12 years from now, Third Street will have been refreshed.
That is the great hope. And it's a challenge to us, too, because we are a preservation community, and the terms and extent of that preservation versus modernization is a big challenge, too, and I think we all want to have a say in some of that. But you talk about Third Street being restored, and you'll get to 10 people, you'll get 10 different opinions of what that means. So it's going to be exciting in 10 years to see what restoration actually means in German Village.
Indeed. Bill, you've done so much with and for the society. You know, a lot of neighborhoods are historic and have old buildings in them. What to you makes German Village particularly special?
Well, as said with Oktoberfest, it's all about the people. It is just amazing to me at times that how people can move in, and 10 days later they're as passionate about our community and what it means to them as anyone who's been here for 40 years. The people keep it alive, the people keep it moving, the people keep reinventing the German Village community. I think that's amazing, and that's exciting, and that's, I guess, why I'm still doing things.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and good luck in all you do with the society.
I hope we do succeed in all of those things, so thank you.
Thanks. All right.